Good afternoon and welcome to yet another episode of the EQ Lunch and Learn. My name is Mucha Mlingo and I am delighted to have you here for yet another important conversation about how you can utilize emotional intelligence in your workspace. So today we're talking about managing upwards, strengthening relationships with your boss, or strengthening your relationship with your boss. Whether you're just starting out your career, leading a team, or navigating organizational change, one thing remains true: the ability to effectively manage and influence the relationship that you have with your supervisor or managers makes or breaks your professional growth. What does managing upwards actually mean? Well, it goes beyond simply keeping your boss informed or doing what you're told. It's all about building trust, aligning expectations, navigating communication styles, and becoming a proactive contributor to the success of both your leader and your team. And so today we're going to be talking about managing upwards, a really critical conversation. And like I said, I'm delighted to have you here with me. Together with my expert speakers, we're going to explore what it means to them to manage upwards in today's dynamic work environments, why this skill is essential for career development and team success, and most importantly, some practical tools for getting this right, fostering trust, clarity, and collaboration with your boss. So, this is your space to learn, reflect, and ask questions, whether you're here to get unstuck, improve how you show up at work, or just to understand how to deal with different management styles. You're in the right place. So, let's get started with some introduction so we can dive into the heart of managing upwards. As always, I am really excited about the panel that I have with me today. I have some really amazing individuals who are going to contribute to our conversation today. So let me bring them up. We have one who is a resident here, and her name is Susan Chege. She's been on this platform a number of times, so she's no stranger if you have been here before. She is an impassioned advocate for continuous improvement and personal development, which she practices through coaching, learning facilitation, and speaking engagements on a myriad of people centered focuses. She's driven by the belief that each of us has a unique purpose and are equipped with the potential to pursue the same so as to enjoy life abundantly. And this is not just words. I know Susan fairly well, and I can confirm that this is a reality. Outside of her professional life, she is an engaged Rotarian, enjoys the outdoors. She is a seasonal wogger, and we're going to ask her what that is. And she thrives in spending quality time with the young, whose energy and spirits keep her inspired. Susan, so good to have you here once again. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. We were having some chats backstage, and I'm like, these are exciting people. So I'm looking forward to learning from everyone this afternoon.
Fantastic. If you want to connect with Susan, we've shared her LinkedIn, a link to her LinkedIn profile. Goodness gracious. Tongue tied. I think I've not had my lunch yet, but I'm really looking forward to engaging with you, Susan. With us as well, we have Bongani, who I would like to bring up next. Bongani, it's really great to have you here. Bongani Chinkanda is a dynamic marketing leader with a passion for solving business challenges through creative, people centered strategies. Born in Malawi, educated in Zimbabwe and South Africa, he holds a degree from Rhodes University and brings over 2 decades of experience across trade marketing, brand activations, and youth engagement. Bongani, is really great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mucha. Hi, Susan. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to engaging with everybody and sharing the bit that I know of leading organizations, but also being accountable to boards and investors. So definitely looking forward to sharing. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mongani. It's really great to have you here. And if you want to connect with Mongani, you can also find him on LinkedIn. Last but definitely not least, we have with us Michelle, Michelle Kimani. Michelle, it's great to have you here. We were just admiring Michelle's beautiful background. Michelle is an early career professional who's learned firsthand the power of bringing your supervisors along in your journey. While walking across consulting and operations, she's seen how transparency, curiosity, and small consistent check-ins can turn working relationships into strong partnerships. She was promoted in under 2 years by leaning into feedback, asking better questions, and treating managing up not as a chore, but as a shared project. She currently works in operations and strategy, where she supports teams in building structure, strengthening feedback loops, and finding clarity in the chaos. Michelle, it is really great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mucha, for that introduction. Excited for the conversation. I think just everyone who's on, there's so much to learn and just excited to see what we uncover.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. If you'd like to connect with Michelle, again, you can find her on LinkedIn. So let us get started. I think this is a really, really great topic that we have. And I know always these conversations are really great fun. Michelle, I brought you on last. Let's start with you. When you hear the phrase managing upwards, what does it personally mean to you in the context of your current role and professional experience? As I introduced you, we talked about how you've really leaned in to building a strong collaborative relationship with your managers. Can you just share how this concept shows up in your day-to-day responsibility and what it looks like in practice for someone in your position?
Thanks, Mucha. So when I first started my career, I think managing upwards was so scary because in your head, you're like, oh my God, do I have to update my supervisor every single second? What if I haven't finished my work? What if I'm still in the starting stage? And no one wants to look incompetent to their boss. But slowly over time in the field I was working with, management consulting and all the projects and the clients you work with, I think my mentor always told me it's so important to always be telling your manager what's up. You'd rather over communicate what you're thinking, what you're doing. And it's just, to me, managing upwards means finding alignment. Finding alignment, whether that's from the brainstorming session, finding alignment, whether that's in what is the deliverable we're actually going to do, finding alignment in once we have a meeting, let's check in. Did that go the way you planned? Is there things you'd want me to pick on? So I hear managing upwards, to me, it's like always find alignment with your boss and take those opportunities. It doesn't have to be very formalized. It could be a quick, when you're in the kitchen together, hi, I just saw this. How would you like me to address this? That's the way you quickly find those moments for alignment. So that to me is what managing upwards, if I was to
I
summarize.
love that. Finding alignment. I really like that. I think that's a really great way to think about it. And I think sometimes, like you say, when you think about managing upwards, it sounds like this big, heavy task. And it almost sounds somewhat negative. Mongani, I'd love to hear from you as someone who especially now has, grown in leadership and you are working, like you said, with boards, with investors. What does managing upwards mean for you in your context and your current role and professional experience? And what does it look like in practice for you?
I guess I'm the upward. so being the managing director of quite a sizable team. One thing that I've learned is that because my chairman is not operational, so from an ops perspective, I'm the one leading the team. It's about the posture that you come with as a leader. And it's always a tough balance between being approachable and having clarity and purpose in terms of where the business needs to go and holding people accountable. So there's that tension that always one has to manage because also there's generational dynamics. I'm a child of the 70s or late 70s. So we're very much about, we grew up from you need to deliver, you need to show up at work. No if, buts, or maybes. You just need to get it done because that's how success comes. But now, and then there's an older generation as well that that believes in long-term careers in the agency, and they look at authority as unapproachable. But then you've now got this new generation who, through COVID, have tapped into more of their feelings, and they sort of believe that they know better than you, in a sense. So it's also about how do you manage that and guide them to say, you know what, life is an experience. You might have ideas, but it's about how to bring them across. So that's the context that I find myself every day. It's quite challenging, and sometimes emotionally draining for me. But again, I think it's important. It's the posture whereby you're not always at Friday drinks, because some people might think they're your friend, and they can be able to tell you off in a meeting.
Yeah.
But also it's about being able to take feedback. So there's times where people have come to me and spoken to me about how tough I'm being on the team in terms of the deliverables. And it's about just leaning into that and taking that feedback as a gift.
I love that. It's really
Yeah.
great to hear the two perspectives, right? From Michelle and from you, Bongani, as the one who's receiving this managing upwards. And I think it's really awesome that we have this space to be able to look at things from both perspectives. Both perspectives. Susan, you bring an interesting perspective, because I think that you are someone who people are managing upwards to, but as an HR professional, as someone who's been, in charge of kind of the people and culture, you also have an interesting lens that you can look at this concept of managing up. So for you, maybe just talk to us a little bit about what managing upwards means from your perspective, and thinking about it both from the point of view of you as the individual, so the leader or the employee with bosses, but also from an HR perspective as you're thinking about an organization or a team.
Thanks, Mucha. And, as Bogani was talking, I was just really appreciating the representation in the panel, because we have the one being managed upwards, the one managing upwards, and then we have HR who has a lens of both and trying to balance it. So I think we have a good representation for a great conversation. I agree with both Michelle and Bogani. It's about alignment, and it's about setting the right tone and temperature to allow for that alignment. When I think of managing upwards, and you said this word quite a number of times when you were introducing the topic, it's relationships. So relationships happen between people. So when I think of managing upwards, it's about getting to know the people. So if I'm managing my board, which HR has the opportunity to do because we report to the board, or if I'm managing the MD, or if I'm managing the different managers across the same level, it's about really getting to know those individuals and understanding what drives them, what's important to them, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what their expectations are. Michelle brought in the element of communication. Some people want to go to the kitchen and have their coffee and not have somebody tell them what the email they saw. But others want you to stop them even outside the bathroom door and give them the update. So really understanding the people that you're working with will help is what managing upwards is about. It's about getting to understand that person. And in the context of what role HR plays in that, it's about promoting a workplace that really does encourage people to get to know each other as people and as human beings, which then unlocks the alignment and unlocks that environment.
Thanks, Susan. I want to stay with you, Susan, and still leaning into your expertise as an HR professional. What key skills, behaviors, or attitudes do you believe enable an employee to effectively manage upwards? You touched a little bit about communication. I'd love to hear more. And if you could speak to why these traits matter when it comes to building trust with leadership, and how you've possibly seen them positively impact work dynamics or career progression.
Okay, that's a loaded question, Mucha. I'm like, do I have 50 minutes? No, but I'll take it back to the relationship building. I think one's capacity to build relationships is leveraged on their social awareness, yeah, how they can read a room and how they can get to know people. And that helps you even with that communication, because then you identify the tone that works for this individual, the kind of communication that works. Is it an email? Is it a conversation? How much communication do they need? Do they want all the details, or is my boss the kind of person that just needs bullet points and we move on? So the first thing is that ability to build relationships, the skill, which is an EQ skill of social awareness. And I think how I've seen that work really well is there's no one size fits all. It's having the skill to build the relationship and build and understand the people around you, then prepares you or enables you to work together for what fits. So what might work between Danny and Michelle might not necessarily work between yourself and I, because we are two distinct individuals. So when you come back to the skills and traits and characteristics, it's people who are willing to take the time to build relationships, good communication skills, good authenticity, because then it's something that is sustainable. When you agree on something and you're willing to partner with who you're managing upwards and vice versa, then you're able to manage upwards and manage a symbiotic relationship.
Thanks, Susan. I like that. I think that it's really important that we enhance some of these skills that we may not consider as so important. And I think that in order to really manage upwards well, then it really speaks to building some of these softer skills. Michelle, what challenges do you think younger professionals often face when trying to manage upwards? And thinking about those maybe who work in very hierarchical organizations, or just generally, what are some of the challenges that younger professionals face in trying to manage upwards?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I can definitely speak on my own experience and maybe also a few for some people we joined together at the same time. I think one of the biggest fears is just one, when you get stuck, you don't know who to say it to. You don't want to go to your boss and be like, "Hi, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do," because you don't that fear of being incompetent. But at the same time, we're just frozen in time. So you get this assignment, you've never seen how to do it before. Maybe you're asked to build a dashboard. Maybe you're asked to do this, and you're just stuck. And no one is saying anything, and a week passes, and your manager comes to you and they're like, "Where is this?" And you're like, So I think that's a big challenge, and maybe also something we learn in school. A lot of times when you're doing a lot of your schoolwork, let's say you're just a recent graduate, you show your lecturer the final product. It's very rare that we're actually going to sit with the lecturer and be like, "This is how I feel at stage 1. This is how I feel at stage 3." And I think it's overcoming that and bringing your manager in, being aware of these are the places where I might have shortcomings and I need assistance. But it can't just be like, "I need assistance here." It has to be, what are you doing proactively to do the research, right? If someone tells you, "Build for me a dashboard," have you gone and searched? Have you done your research that when now you come to your manager, it's like, "Hi, I've looked at these and these examples the company has done. I'm lost here." So I think getting over that fear and seeing our managers as people we can talk to, as Susan said, sometimes we just have to actually build a relationship with people, especially when we're in big organizations that could have 300 people. It's very hierarchical, but at the same time, there's someone you're directly reporting to. And sometimes managing upwards could also be managing through your peers, someone you're working with who has experience with maybe your supervisor and can give you insight and be like, "Oh, the supervisor X likes to be approached this way." That's another way you can lean into that relationship skill of people around you. But I really think sometimes it's that fear that gets onto us, and maybe to some extent, maybe we feel like we know too much and we run all the way with our ideas without consulting. And I love that about young people. We're innovative, we're creative. But yeah, as we said, we need to find that alignment a bit early on so that your boss won't be like, "Wait, where are you going? What are you doing?"
And I think it speaks to what Bongani said earlier, that with the younger individuals in the workforce, whether it's millennials, Gen Z, there is that wanting to go, and this feeling of confidence in self, and that I've got this. And I really like what you keep saying, this idea of alignment, right? It's not necessarily that you feel your boss is micromanaging you. It's just, let's be aligned. And it makes sense, right, to be aligned early rather than you've done all this work and then it's not quite what needed to be done. Michelle, I want to stay with you a little bit because you talked about overcoming this fear, perhaps, of asking for help or speaking to or gaining this alignment, right? And then you also talked about the fact that some of it is almost, I'm using my own words, like conditioning, in the sense that through university you didn't really sit regularly with your lecturer. So I want us to be practical here. So what are some of the ways, or what's helped you to overcome that fear or to change that mindset? So I know you gave one example of, if you feel that you can't speak directly to your supervisor, who are some of your peers that you could leverage? But is there anything else for someone who's sitting there thinking, you know what, it's really hard for me to talk to my supervisor or to check in? What are some practical tips that maybe have helped you?
Yeah, I would say thanks for that. I think first, the internet is abundant with information. I always say start there. You know how like sometimes as parents, I know my mom says this a lot. Like when kids always ask you questions, you're like, just Google it, you know? And I think that's also an approach to take when you first start at that place where you're like, oh, I'm so stuck. Go on the internet and just find some examples, see what's happening. And I feel like there's so many pieces and nuggets of wisdom around us. It could even be someone working in a different organization. You could have that one-on-one with, because a lot of the things we're doing, yes, you might be in professional services, yes, you might be in banking, but a lot of the systems are very similar from point A to point B on how to do a deliverable. So sometimes it's even reaching out to a cousin and be like, hi, I'm a bit stuck here. Could you give me some advice? And we've talked about like gaining that confidence. Identify your peers within the organization that you can actually now start building that relationship and show your work. I think something that organizations can do, which I really loved at where I was working, is we had a buddy mentor system. So whenever a new enters, you have a buddy that's someone who's similar to your position that you can talk to, and you're immediately assigned, and you have a mentor. That's someone who's like a project lead 3 times ahead of you, and they kind of both act as areas of
Yeah.
consultation and advice. I always advise people, if you're feeling really stuck with an idea and you want to go to your manager, draft something up. Today we're very visual. You can go into AI and kind of drafting, visually conceptualize your idea. So when you're going to your manager, like, this is what I'm thinking, then now they can be like, okay, now that there's something I can see, I can review. So it's just
Yeah.
one, be yourself a bit more. Two, use the internet, go wild, go on
Yeah.
ChatGPT, put of examples.
Yeah.
And once you've collected your thoughts and ideas, now approach your manager or approach your
Yeah.
peer or your manager and be like, this is what I'm
Yeah.
thinking. Can we sit down for 30 minutes and we just
Yeah.
align?
And I really love, the proactive approach, because I think that most supervisors, I mean, I know there are people who work with really terrible bosses, and we'll talk a little bit about how do you manage in a space where you have one of those really difficult bosses, and how do you manage upwards in that scenario. But I think most leaders really appreciate when you come and you're maybe stuck, or you have some ideas, but you've got something that you're starting with. And I think I really like what you said about doing a bit of research. So online, phone a friend, ask a colleague, and just do some work around understanding your person. And I guess, to Susan's earlier point, understand their communication style, because then that helps you to know how to approach them. Bongani, I want to come to you.
Just before
And
you move
yes, Susan. Of course, go ahead.
as I'm listening to what you and Michelle are discussing, I think it's just it's like an aha moment on what exactly is managing upwards. And Michelle has put it really well in preparing, and when she's seeking that alignment, that proactivity is actually what managing upwards is. It's being proactive and taking charge of that relationship with your supervisor or your manager, where you're actually saying, okay, I've understood you, I know what you need, now I'm going to take charge of that and capture the moments I need, so that you are of use to me in terms of guidance, and in terms of achieving our collective goal, our common goals. So I think I'm like, that is actually what managing upwards is. It's about
Yeah.
you taking charge of that relationship, working with what you've observed in terms of the relationship, the person, and the goals, but you taking that initiative.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan. Bongani, I wanted to come to you as a leader. What specific qualities or behaviors do you find most valuable in team members who excel at managing upwards? So if someone's thinking, maybe what are some of the skills that I need to develop more so that I can manage upwards more effectively? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think for me, I guess it goes for both. So it's very critical for leaders to create an environment. There's a difference between authority and experience, right?
Mm,
So when you're leaning in more into experience, you're opening up the door for being managed upwards than authority. Because authority, I mean, all of us, we go through a system where authority means I can't be questioned. Teachers,
yeah.
parents, lecturers. But now you get into a work environment whereby we don't authority is there, but I think authority needs to only be exercised when it's taking responsibility for your work as a leader. So I always tell my team the reason why I lead this business is just because of what experience has blessed me with. So there isn't much that I've not seen or handled, right? And that's why I'm
Mm,
a director. Not that I'm a special human being. It's just life has given me better experience. So when you start leaning into that as a leader, what you then tend to do is people look at you as a place to come to for help because
mm,
so you're creating that safe environment. Um, what's critical as well as a leader before I get into the behaviors that you
yeah,
look
yeah, yeah.
at, what's critical is also as a leader is the power of critical thinking and emotional intelligence. So when somebody says I can't do this or I'm failing to do this or I can't see this or they're panicking, it is not your role in that specific moment to beat them down and say, "Yeah, but I told
Mm,
you, or you are doing this," is either take that as a teaching moment, and then maybe if they've made a mistake after that, once you've taught them, then you say, "But how did you see this? Maybe you could have looked at it this way." So this week, for example, I was in a meeting where we're facing a very difficult problem, and my FD said, "No, this process has been tough and all this." So what I did is I asked, "So how different would we have approached the problem, right?" Because in a sense, she was feeling uncomfortable by a decision I'd made that impacted the emotion well-being of certain individuals in the business. So then she voiced, maybe we could have done it this way. then,
mm,
then for me, I
mm,
would have said, okay, but maybe. So it's, in that moment, it was about being open-minded,
yeah,
and quickly justify your decision. So she was managing upwards. Um,
yeah.
I think what's very important characteristics for me is the hunger to learn from subordinates. So wanting to learn, always having a posture of 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 willing to fail, but having tried, right? Um, or being able to be in an environment where you actually volunteering for the business to support you to take a certain risk so that you're able to learn, because most learning is done through failure than through success, right?
Mm,
So for example, if you want to run a project, put your hand up and say, could I run with this? But there will be times where I'll be reaching out to you and needing your help. So again, once there's that environment of experience, not authority, then it opens up that sense. I think what frustrates most leaders is that there's a sense of ego and confidence that we've got as leaders because we've done this and that's why we're here, right? And it's a tact in terms of questioning our decisions that is important, because it can bruise our ego or our confidence, and you get somebody lashing out, right?
mm,
Or being harsh because your tact was, I mean, maybe you're in a meeting and you're like, yeah, but I don't buy into that idea because the leader said everybody's ideas can get heard, right? And then you just in a different forum, you in a town hall, you're questioning your MD or CEO's a process. So because remember that ego and confidence is what got us here, and it's what's keeping this business afloat, making profits. So if your tact is not timed, we tend to take things personally. It's just the leadership.
Mm.
And then the last thing, and while we're discussing this, I think the other thing for me, what I'm finding quite difficult with, I think social media has democratized thinking, and because there's a generation that consumes social media and gets advice mostly from people that have not got the experience, but because they're voicing out on X or TikTok or whatever it is. Um, some, not all, some subordinates in the new generation take that as verbatim because John Maxwell said, but John Maxwell is not based in Kenya and he doesn't face what we face.
Mm.
Then they take it as if they know better than their boss. And it becomes quite a tension. So it's just quite important to always lean in into the experience and start with what would you think? Start with probing questions. How would you look at this? How would you approach this? How would you, because what you're doing is again stroking the ego because obviously um,
Yeah.
and I do it as well. I mean, my chairman is quite a successful business person. He's got multiple businesses, and if I want his attention, I have to get his attention by reminding him how great of a man he is. Um, Obviously, by not worshiping him, but just saying, I would
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
learn from what you've done in other businesses. Then it clicks to him. Oh, actually, yeah, makes sense. Let me sit down with this guy. And
Yeah.
also the way that I do it with my chairman is because these are quite busy people, you respect their forum. So when you're setting up meetings, always have an agenda so that when you're in there, they believe, firstly, they're feeling respected, their time is precious, and then they get to listen to you. So that's what I've learned from managing upwards in terms of chairmen and boards and shareholders.
I love it. Thank you very much. I think that I can see both Susan and Michelle nodding and smiling as you're sharing. And indeed, I think that because information is very easily accessible, we need to be very mindful that it is a source of information. It is not the source, right? And we need to be able to weigh up the insights we've gained. And I really like what you said about respecting. And I think that, it's respecting the fact that someone, like you said, it has the experience. And I really love what you talked about, this idea of leaders leaning into experience rather than authority. And I think it's a really important lesson for anyone who is managing upwards to also lean into the fact that this leader that you're working with has experience that you do not have. And yes, you may have great ideas, and those ideas are invaluable, but respect the experience. I really like that. And I think that that's a really, really great takeaway. So thank you very much for sharing that. If you are with us online, don't forget to say hello. We love to hear from you. Let us know where you are joining us from, and we'll give you a shout out back. It's really great to have you here today. And I know that this conversation is only going to get better. Time is flying by, so let us continue. Let's talk about some red flags. And I'm going to ask this question to all three of you. Bongani, I can stay with you as we continue. And then, ladies, I'll ask you to chime in on the same. Let's talk about some red flags that you have noted, right? We're talking about managing upwards. So what, in your experience, are some subtle and some obvious red flags that signal a disconnect or a breakdown in the relationship between a team leader and a team member? And how can I be proactive? And Bongani, you can look at it from a leader's perspective. How can we be proactive in addressing these signs before they escalate and become a really big deal and result in a very toxic working relationship?
Yeah, so I think one big thing that's always an issue is when people personalize outcomes than the work, right? When you go into meetings, people say you are like this is, and they start putting labels on each other. Because what you do then people immediately become emotional. And I always find it it's actually a thing I'm facing in the business where there's a junior and one of the ESCO members, they struggling to get along. And one thing that I'd said, and the EXCO member actually sort of like was surprised in my support of her. I said, when you go into these meetings and this person is lashing out at you and this, let them finish, but then you should also be able to lash back out. And then she says, really? So I was like, but you're human. So because what juniors think they can do, it's that thing of saying you go into the room, mess everything up, walk away, and not expect pushback, right? And because it's nice, because and Susan knows it happens in HR meetings all the time. Somebody will come and say, Bongani is this. But when it's time for Bongani to start pointing out the things that frustrate him, they don't want that feedback, right? So when you're managing upwards as well, you need to be very open to the fact that you also can get told, right, in no uncertain terms, respectfully so, that actually the way you handled you were stubborn, your approach was not tactful, you didn't listen, you didn't follow instruction, and suddenly it's like, oh okay, because it's always easy. Somebody once said is that, remember that democracy is for the majority, but there'll always be the minority that won't get what they want, right? And people believe that, like in work environments, because Bongani says, guys, you can manage upwards, and people believe they can just shoot up and I can shoot down, right? And when it's time for me to say, okay, cool, thanks for managing upwards. You've said to me you don't like it when I do this, but please just know that non-delivery. So for me, as an example, my love language is delivery, right? Very my Enneagram scale. It actually frustrates me. Like when I was driving here, I was concerned that I'll be late for 25 past, right? Not for the half past. So that's just how I operate. Now, if that's my love language, and you've come to me to question me in terms of how I handled a meeting and I frustrated you, cool, I take that. But remember that you still need to deliver, right? So just because I spoke to you in a certain way, and I've apologized, the issue is still the issue. The issue is still the work. And I find that people always find that challenging because they then take that work that very personally again, when you're being very clear in terms of dates, times, when you want stuff, it makes people feel uncomfortable.
Wow. I feel like, if we're in church, I'd say amen. I love that. I love that point because it's very true that the managing upwards then is inviting a two-way conversation, right? So yes, I really value your insights and your input. And yeah, to your point, Mongani, I apologize if my tone of voice, wasn't as it should have been. So I've apologized, but let's not forget that there's the deliverable, right?
100%.
And one of the things that I've been learning to express more lately is the fact that you're not going to agree with everything I say. And when I've heard you, but suck it up, right? Because there's times where it's not going to change our way forward. So I hear you. I really want to hear you. And I want you to feel you can always give me feedback. But giving me feedback doesn't mean I'm always going to take your feedback or implement your feedback. And I think a key part of managing upwards is understanding that when all is said and done, you've given your feedback and you don't agree with the direction your leader has taken, you need to just move on, right? You can't then throw a tantrum and sulk in the office, right? And then now it impacts all your other behavior. And I think that's something I'm learning to articulate a lot more. I tend to be, I think delivery is my love language like you, but one of the challenges I have is that I don't always deal with non-delivery, right? So I love it. And my best relationships are with team members who deliver because it's such a joy to work with them. But one of the muscles I'm learning to flex is how to handle the non-delivery. So thank you very much for that. Michelle, let's hear your perspective on the same question.
As a Gen Z in the room, like I have to White people
Yes.
will agree too. I know
Yes.
there's a lot of views that Gen Zs tend to either use mental health or tend to have all these excuses. And I think it's something you've mentioned really clearly about that when you manage up, we expect feedback down. And I think something I had to learn, I know in the beginning when you have feedback, it feels like this is a reflection on me. It's the same way. And I love to go back to university because we're usually as early career professionals coming out of university or coming out of diplomas or etc. And when you get a bad grade, it feels like that's a reflection of your intelligence, right? So that's how we get bad grades. So when we come into the workforce and we get negative feedback, we're like, this is a reflection of my intelligence. If my manager's telling me I don't feel like we're applying critical thinking here, and I'll feel like, okay, I don't think properly. I tend to take it as this is a direct reflection of who I am as a person. And I think it's always important, as it's been mentioned, to see this is a reflection of their work. It's a reflection of the output I've given. And coming to realize, and something I realized is that when you go through this iteration process with your manager and they keep giving you feedback and you keep improving, and I want guys to be able to like save those first deliverables you have and see what you come up with like 10 times down the line, and you'll see the biggest difference, and you'll only appreciate that more you keep going into your career. So where I was month one when I started was very different to where I am now, because I realized my manager's input is making this better. It's not to cancel me out. It's not to, if my manager sees my deck and cancels the whole slide and is like, this isn't what we're going. You learn to let go, because you realize when you see V1 versus V20 or V50 or how many versions it has to take, it's such a difference. And you grow so much by leaning into that. And I think just going back to the question about obvious red flags, for me, it's always when your manager asks you, where is this work? My mentor used to tell me, if your manager ever asks you, where is X, you're already late. You've already, you've already spoken
Yeah.
it. You're already too late. So to me, if you keep seeing your manager constantly asking you, it's like, okay, I haven't yet built that relationship where they trust me, where like I'm communicating effectively and communicating in a way that makes sense to them. That could be email, that could be in passing, etc. But whenever there's that, hi, where is this? Where is that? I've noticed like this email hasn't been addressed. If your manager keeps coming down with those type of questions, just know you're already not setting the tone for a good like upward management relationship.
Wow. I feel like another amen right there. I really, really loved what you said.
Yeah,
Yes, Mani, you want to
I
jump
just
in?
want to touch to Michelle's Jen. So I'm a survivor of depression and anxiety. So I'm a proponent of mental health. Like there isn't work that is worth your mental health, right?
Mm,
Especially when the environment is toxic. What
mm,
what I'm not for is that is using mental health to escape building resilience, because like whether you like it or not, life is built in the fire, right?
mm,
It's like when you go to the gym, you gotta lift for you to build muscle. If you need to run a marathon, you gotta go through 10Ks, you gotta go through 22, you have to get through to 36. There's no escaping the pain of 16 kilometers, right? So I'm always very aware, well aware where when it's hard and people are not delivering because they don't want to put in the pain of resilience to get the growth, then
mm.
they miss me around mental health.
Yeah. Thank you.
I
Thank
have
you for
nodded
that.
so much in my seat. I think I've ruined the suspension of my seat. Yes, yes, yes. Oh yeah. I mean, both Bogani and Michelle, I'm like, yeah, completely understand it. And like I said earlier, I have the perspective of seeing both sides of it. And Michelle, I really loved what you said about taking the time to see the difference between version 1 and version 20.
Do you know,
And
Susan, that was my amen. Like I loved that point. I really, really love, and I think it changes your perspective on the feedback, right?
yeah.
Recognizing that it's not personal. And I really love the idea you've given, Michelle, that save version 1 and
Mm,
then compare it to version 10. And you see for yourself that actually this was about my development. I really like that point. Sorry, I
I've,
have
I've
yeah.
to
got,
jump in
And
there,
it
I've
Susan.
really
got a
ties
different,
back to what
yeah.
Bogani was saying earlier about, the values, what can propel somebody in their career and their growth is somebody who's eager to learn. And that's how that shows up, is that you actually see and you're like, wow, I've learned, and you accept that feedback as an opportunity to learn. Bogani, you're blowing up. What do you want to say?
Well, the question that I've got, Michelle, is to your boss, why are we at version 20 when we should have been at version 5? So clearly, that person is
The feedback is also the feedback, also the quality of feedback also needs some improvement.
Yes, exactly. So my thing to the person you report to is, why are we at version 20? Clearly, the instruction at version 4 is not clear. So that's
let me with version 20 was just hyperbole. Just in case my boss is watching.
Unless your boss is watching.
So just bringing it back to what Mucha
Yeah.
you had posed earlier about the red flags, and it comes from what even Bogani and Michelle are both saying. One of the red flags that we see in the workplace for recognizing that there's an issue here with the managing upwards is where surprises come up in performance discussions, where that is the first time that Michelle is getting feedback that we do not need to be going to version 20. And where Bogani is hearing for the first time from Michelle that your instructions are unclear. So the first red flag that you can see that there's a disconnect, and I think to use Michelle's words, that there's a misalignment, is where the performance discussion is the first time that there's real communication happening. Another red flag that it makes it glaring that there's an issue is where there's an emotional disconnect. And by that, I mean that you can see it in the way they speak to each other, the way the email is written. It's very cut, it's very curt, it's very technical. There's avoidance of having actual one-on-one meetings. We want to just communicate on email. And there you start to say, okay, here there's an issue here, because as Bogani said, there's a human, right? And you can't take that away in the workplace. We are still humans. And where that usually stems from is something that Michelle touched on earlier, is fear. So if I'm fearful of my boss, then even moving outside of the subject matter to share what my idea could be, or a different way that we could do it, or anything outside of what was strictly in the program, I can't do that because I'm fearful. And similarly for what we're seeing Bogani saying as well, is that there's also that fear. What I'm seeing in the workplace, not even what Bogani said, there's fear for bosses to also give feedback. And because I don't want to be accused of being insensitive. I don't want to be accused of not having timed it right. And so the fear goes both ways. And it comes from the misalignment, and it comes from not taking the time to build that relationship. And so some of the things that are critical for organizations, and Mucha, you said it earlier, is to actually really invest in these skills. That emotional intelligence that helps people to read a room, to be socially aware, to understand myself, to know that, Michelle, I'm working with you, and I prefer if we communicate this way. I want us to check in this way. So that taking the time to build those skills, so that then those relationships have a platform to develop.
Yeah.
And that comes from coaching people on, as leaders, how do you be more emotionally available? As leaders, how do you share feedback in a constructive manner? As those being led, how do you also share feedback in a constructive manner? When do you come out and say, that idea is not great? Is it at the staff forum, or is it on the one-on-one? How do you go about saying it? It's not that great an idea. I don't know what you've been doing for the last 20 years. Or is it saying, hey, I was reading up on this, and we could possibly try this, and it has been successful at A, B, C, D. So catching that red flag early in an organization can help to avoid that toxic culture. But it takes investing in building those skills. And like Bogani said, it's a muscle. You have to keep exercising it, and EQ then becomes a part of everything that you do and how you do it. And leading people, you can't avoid leading the person, not the goals and the KPIs. And as managing upwards, you are leading. You are also leading that conversation and that relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I always, and if I could implement it as policy for human beings, is don't have friends at work, right? Especially your boss, or when you're in a department that one day one of you might end up leading it, right? Because it creates unnecessary expectations, blurred lines, and it ends up being a toxic culture. And I can explain this. So if you and me are running the same department and we are golfing buddies and we go away as families on weekends and it's great for 5 years, then one of us gets promoted, right?
Yeah.
And it's great because the promotion has happened. But it's just a human thing where our pleasure or our sense of comfort is in the spaces that we are never questioned, right? So we always lean into the friendship side.
Mm.
I then call you out, or if I'm trying to manage you as my friend upwards, either Bongani who got promoted gets offended, like how,
Mm.
what, you're jealous, like it goes on and on, or it becomes difficult for me to call you out as a friend, because then how do I call you out in the office then, we, so it becomes blade lines, right? Then the other thing for me is a definite red flag is managers, to Susan's point. You can never deliver growth feedback. I don't want to call it negative feedback. You can never deliver growth feedback the first time somebody is doing it 6 months APIs or 6 months, right? Or 3 or 6 months, or however you do it. Because I'm like, but like I've been working the last 6 months. Now we
Yeah.
started meeting, and now I'm putting in a rap sheet.
Yeah.
This is not working.
Yeah.
So it's important to have weekly check-ins. When something happens, immediately address it. To say, listen, the way you handled yourself in that meeting, you would have done better. And also for you as a subordinate, I think what's important to open the space for feedback, for managing upwards, is when you do a big project, and let's say you went to present to the exco, call your manager aside and ask, how did I do in
How
there?
did I do? Yeah.
Right? Because you're opening yourself to being given the feedback immediately. So then they're able to share, maybe you would have done better, you would have done this.
Yeah, I love that. And that goes back to the hunger you talked about earlier, Bongani.
Yeah.
So we have a few people here today who said hi. Caroline Kusimba, it's great to have you joining from Nairobi. Veronica Mwihaki from Nairobi as well, and HRO. Mary Waweru says she's really excited to be here. So that's really cool to have you. And yeah, we've got some comments that have come through. So managing upwards, strengthening relationships with our bosses. What does that mean? Understanding their values and goals, communicating. I think, Michelle, you talked about the fact that you'd rather over communicate and have someone tell you, okay, that you don't need to give me that much updates. Let's scale it down. Relationship building, reading the room, authenticity. Monica Mayo, a banker, says she's loving the conversation. Aziz Kalungi says it's very insightful. So thank you very much for sharing. If you have a question for the panel, please share your question in the comments so that we can come to it. I'm seeing our time is really flying by. And one thing I want to do before I forget is I want to share with you a QR code. We'd love to hear from you. So we'd love to hear from you. I'm just sharing a link where you can share your feedback. Let me actually put it a bit at the top so that it doesn't, there we go. I've got it at the side so it doesn't interfere with the conversation. So use the QR code, tell us what you like about this conversation, and also tell us what you'd like us to discuss. We have our EQ Lunch and Learn every last Wednesday of the month, 12:30 to 2 p.m. East Africa time. And really what we're doing here is we're demystifying emotional intelligence. We're sharing with you how emotional intelligence is such a critical skill. One of the things I always say is that emotional intelligence is not another skill that you need to add to the plate. It is the plate upon which all these other skills lie. And so that's the conversation we have every last Wednesday of the month. So tell us if there's topics you'd like us to discuss. Interestingly, from our panel today, one of the things that's come up, I noted this as part of my key takeaways, is this idea of creating a safe environment. And next month, we're talking about psychological safety. So in our conversation next month, we're talking about psychological safety, and we always have a panel that look at things from different perspectives, just like we have today, right? The HR lens, the lens of the younger, early career professional, and the lens of the leader. So, guys, let me come back to you again. Let's continue with our conversations. And don't forget, like I said, please put your questions in the chat if you have them. Michelle, what has helped you build trust and rapport with your manager or the senior leaders? And I know you do quite a bit of project work. So my assumption is that you're not only interacting with your manager, but you're also interacting with other senior consultants within the firm. So what's helped you to build trust and rapport?
I'd say the first thing, and I think it kind of goes to Bogani's point, sorry, is delivery. And through delivery, it's reliability. So being a reliable team player, the more reliable you are, the more your manager trusts you. So if you say, I will get this to you at this time, and you actually deliver on the time you said, that builds that trust to the point where when you are in a sticky situation, your manager understands it's not coming from this one is trying to dodge work, but rather this one is actually going to deliver. There's a time in consulting, you're working on so many different projects. So I was on like 4 projects at the same time. And it's Friday in the evening. My managers are coming to me, both asking for different deliverables to do by end of day. So this could be 3 p.m. and someone's telling you by 5, can you please hand this over? And yes, we're human, we have our emotions, we're tired. So I just communicated with my manager, hi, thank you for reaching out on this and this. May you please give me till Monday to submit this to you, and you'll have it on your desk by 9 a.m. They trusted me enough to be like, yes, by 9 a.m., I trust that that work will be delivered because that work was due for the client at a certain time. So when you become a reliable person and you always show up and you commit to your word, it allows your managers to, one, they'll even step back and stop always following you for work. It got to a point when I was having a feedback session with my manager, she was like, while sometimes, let's say it's end of day and maybe I haven't seen your slides, I know by the next day tomorrow, I will see what I need to see, right? And your manager won't be, where is this? Where is that? And that's how you start to build that rapport. And once your managers trust you, there are times I would be even pulled in by like principals to assist them with work and email them directly because they trust the work that they've seen. So it's just you creating a wrapped sheet where you are actually delivering, you're actually improving, you're actually growing to the point where your managers can give you work because now they trust you and they're like, run with it. I trust that you'll see this. I'll see it at 7. If you have issues, I know that you're going to actually ask me questions. But I think that's the biggest way is just always showing up because there's something a manager once told me. If you're someone who always delivers and does good work, trust me, that when you're in those tough times, when your mental health is taking a hit, when you feel like you can't do this no more, when you reach out to your managers, they're more likely to hear you because they know the type of person you are. They trust in your character, they trust in your credibility. So it won't be like, they'd even be willing to be like, okay, I hear you. How can I help you get over this situation? So yeah.
I really love that, Michelle. Underlining, highlighting everything. Because what you said is really key. Is as you're managing those relationships, when you start to define yourself as being reliable, which you do by showing up on all the good days, you really show up. Then you start to develop that people have that reputation. They know that of you, that you're reliable. So even as instructions are being given, you start not having those follow-ups. Is this done? Whatever. They know Michelle will get it done. And that's what then starts to buy you that flexibility that I'm seeing, emerging generations in the workplace asking for. That I want to come in later or I want to, because I know Michelle will get it done. I am no longer concerned about what time she comes in, what time she, because you have built that trust based on the performance and the output that you've been giving and how you've been managing yourself. And I think that's really key as you look at multi-generational workplaces. There's a lot of demand from different generations, but that is earned. There has to be some trust that's built that makes me feel that I can entrust you with managing your time. I can entrust you with going and presenting to so-and-so. Because a lot of the cry is, oh, I would like to have exposure to the client directly. I would like to, but you have to build that over time. So I just wanted to really highlight, I love that you must take the time to build that reputation of being reliable, to be able to unlock that flexibility.
Yeah. And I think, what I'm thinking about, Susan, as you say that, is then the flip side is true, right? So if you are not reliable, if you've not shown evidence of your reliability, it becomes really difficult for your supervisor, for your manager to allow that flexibility, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not sure when you're working from home, are you actually working, right? I don't know from your ability to deliver. So I think the flip side is true as well. And I'd like to imagine that if there's someone who is finding it really hard to get more flexibility from their supervisor, you might want to take a moment to really do some introspection around how your delivery has been. Have you cultivated that rap sheet, as Michelle says, that then is more likely to get you the flexibility you need? And if you haven't, what steps can you take to rebuilding that trust? Because trust can be built even when it's been broken. I mean, it takes a bit of time, but it can be. So I think as you're speaking, I'm just thinking that for someone who feels that maybe you're not getting what you need, it's worth having that introspection to determine what am I doing to contribute. And I think that's what being hungry to learn is all about, right? Always asking, what did I do to contribute to where I am right now? Because I think it's easy for us to make it out that it's the boss's fault, it's the boss who's difficult, it's the boss who's demanding, I have a toxic, leader. And it's possible you do, but the question is, what did you contribute, right, to that? Susan, let's stay with you. How can HR support both managers and team members in navigating some of those communication gaps or personality clashes where the managing upwards isn't quite working? So earlier, Bongani, gave an illustration where he empowered a leader to say, hey, you know what? Communication or feedback works both ways. So be open to receive it, but you also feel confident to give it. And earlier you talked about sometimes how there's a fear that leaders then have, where they don't want to be seen as insensitive, or they're afraid that it will end up being that someone is causing mental health issues. So how can HR support? Because it is not easy to lead, right? And maybe it's a skill that needs to develop. So where does HR come in to that?
Thanks for that, Mucha, and it's a real issue in the workplace right now, because of the different dynamics that we have. We have people from different generations. Workplaces are no longer all from one culture. You have a lot of differences amongst people, and building communication. What we say is not necessarily what is heard. But the first thing is to have people know how they're actually showing up. A lot of times we have a skewed view of who we are. I want to be this way, so I believe I am this way. But I think HR can step in to give people an opportunity, and it can be 360 feedback, or doing assessments, EQ assessments, personality assessments, to give people an opportunity to first really get real about who they are. And with that self-awareness, then I think as an individual, you start to then be real about how you build those relationships and how you troubleshoot communication. Another thing that I've seen happening in the workplace is that there's no clarity in what is expected behavior. So I come in from my X years of experience in 7 different organizations. And so I've formulated a way in my mind, that ways of working and how things should be done. And you equally come with your different ideas, and everyone is there with their own ideas. And that's where the clash starts to happen, when there's no one saying, this is how we operate as organization X. So HR has to step in at that point and be very clear about what are our values, how do we do things, how do we communicate? And that then creates a platform for people to start to speak a similar language. And then outside of that, there are interventions to help people build the capacity, because we can't assume that we all know how to communicate in this setup, in a business setup. So, doing introduction to business communication, and then steering that kind of training at different levels, for what it's appropriate for different levels. So they could be at entry level, it's introduction to business communication. Then as you progress in your leadership journey, you have leadership development, which includes communication. And then where you're in a situation where you're doing first aid, you can do interventions where you're coaching. So there's a situation this manager and this person, they're not getting along completely, and we need to have an intervention where you come in with coaching and say, okay, let's really tackle what this issue is. And it's really important for HR to take up that mantle to recognize here we have a real issue and then match it with the appropriate intervention.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you very much, Susan. And I think that one of the things I'm learning as an organization, we are in the leadership development space. So we work with leaders to build their capacity. And I've come to the realization that we assume a lot as far as leadership capabilities are concerned.
Yeah.
Most organizations, we promote people because of their technical competence, and then we just assume, right?
Yep.
Sometimes the reason why that leader is not good at giving feedback is because they genuinely don't know how to give feedback, right? And yes, it's true. There is, to Michelle's earlier point, we can, we can go to Google, we can, learn these things. But again, that assumes that someone knows that they need to learn, right? And they know that they're not so great at this. So I think that there's a lot to be said about building the capacity of our leaders. And I think both from a coaching perspective, so one-on-one, in your regular one-to-ones. Earlier, Bongani, you were talking about having one-to-ones, and I think that's equally, if you're leading leaders, right? It's important to have those one-to-ones, and then also ensure that those one-to-ones are not just about the milestones from a business perspective, but also how they are leading, so that they can grow. And then I think also just building the capacity of leaders in general. I think is really important.
I think it's important for organizations to recognize that leadership in itself is the job. And when you get into leadership positions, it's less about the technical. So just the same way that you wouldn't take your accountant to go and start designing roads, you shouldn't take somebody who's technically sound and then throw them in a sea of a whole new different skill set, demands, and expect that they'll perform. It's just not fair. So we need to think about it that way, that leadership in itself is a skill that needs to be developed, and you can't assume that they'll pick it up along the way, because you're entrusting that person with your greatest asset, the people. So why take take somebody, give them your biggest truck, and yet they don't have a truck driving license? Makes no sense.
It's I agree with you, Susan. But I also think the challenge with being a leader is that because it happens to me, I go home and I'm like, what did I do today? Because I'm trying to look at the technical value that I added. But then I sit back and I've been in 6 meetings. 4 of those were hard conversations. 2 were trying to stop people from not resigning, and sometimes go because you are rewarded on technical expertise. You think like, no, but I'm not leading, and by being on this call, I'm leading our organization, exposing it to a greater audience. So you're right. I think the challenge is just how the reward system is structured. I think we need to be brave enough to say, I don't think you can lead a team who pay you X amount of money, but just sit in the corner and you're not for this, because leading is tough. It's draining. Like this morning I was just like, do I really need to go in today? Because I know, like you've seen, I've been on this call for the last hour, 10 minutes, and how many times I've done this? Like, because and it's unscheduled meetings, and I don't know what they want.
It's true. You'll find a lot of people will be like, yes, please reward me, promote me, but don't give me leadership responsibility. I don't want it. But we never even ask. We just promote and give them a team.
Exactly. And I find that's a good point, because when even the early career people need to get to know, to say it's important to start leading yourself and being involved in leadership outside of work. So being in a church group, being in a community, being part of a running club, and being the secretary of the running club, because what that does is starts testing your leadership muscle and asking you, is leadership for me,
Yeah.
Because you do find that people burn out because it's really like you get to like there are days I get home and I'm like my talking airtime is finished.
It's
Yeah.
done.
Hide in the corner. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to say
Buy
anything.
more bundles. I'm just done for the day. But then tomorrow you've got the board meeting, so you can't phone in
Yeah,
and say, "I don't think I can come." Sorry.
I'm done.
I just
Yeah,
to
Susan
jump.
will.
Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah,
No,
I
no,
just
go
want to
ahead.
jump in about leadership and the whole aspect, especially from an organization standpoint. I think in terms of what organizations to do, because there's this fear that in a few years we won't have middle management. With AI
Mm,
coming in and doing a lot of the junior stuff. So how are we preparing junior staff to actually take middle management, which is leadership and all that? So I think from an organization standpoint, it's being very intentional of how do we start introducing pockets of leadership early on to someone's career. So as they're progressing throughout, if we're looking at the hierarchy in the business, as they're progressing, they're getting exposed to more and more leadership skills. Is this a person? How do we build their client relationship? How do we build team relationship? And making sure it's embedded even in performance. Because I think upward management
mm,
is just as important as downward management, and that's how you build those leadership skills. And for early career professionals, I'd say one of the things I did this year is just challenge myself. I was like, this year, I'm going to challenge myself to be more visible with my senior team members. I'm going to challenge myself to take on more responsibility. And sometimes this is in a lot of organizations. Sometimes, yes, you have your client work, but we have the work that helps us win as clients or those practice areas. So sometimes
mm,
what I did was volunteer to be a part of the gender practice team from where I worked. And that allowed me to start building those traits. And there you're working in a smaller team, you're trying to build the organization's thought leadership, etc. So if you're in your early career, find those avenues where you can volunteer even at work and you start doing that more. So whether that's a social committee, whether that's an area that like a side project that the business is doing that might not be client facing, like take those opportunities to really practice, because the only way you'll be able to say I'm ready for that promotion is if like you've done the work, you've practiced, you've tested these things in like maybe less high stake environments, and that's the only way. So I think it's both for where organizations need to be intentional, create those leadership opportunities early, so that when you're now promoting, you've prepared them. But also as
yeah.
you who's starting, just be intentional in finding those opportunities as well.
I love
No,
that. Be
great. Yeah.
proactive.
No, definitely, definitely.
Be proactive. I think that's a really great comment. If you have any questions for my panel, please do share them in the comments, whether you're joining us on YouTube or you are on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, we also want to hear your feedback. I promise you it's a very simple questionnaire. It has 3 questions, or maybe 4, but yeah, I think it's 3. And all we're asking is, what did you enjoy? And what topic would you like us to bring? We really do want to hear your voice. So do take a moment, scan the QR code on the screen and fill in the questionnaire. It will not take you long. I'm looking at the time and I can't believe how fast it's gone. And that's always the case with this Lunch and Learn, because we always have such an amazing panel with such amazing insights. So I want us to start winding down. And if there's any questions from the audience, I will bring them to you. I want us to ultimately get to our parting shots. And the parting shot for me is always about the advice you'd give. So just start preparing yourselves. Bongani, I want to ask you a question before we come to the parting shot, but I just want you to prepare yourselves. What practical piece of advice, or, at the most 3 things you would tell someone who is struggling to connect with their boss, or who just wants to ramp up the relationship they have with the boss, right? So when all's been said and done, what is the 1, 2, maximum 3 things that you feel are really critical for someone to implement in order for them to strengthen their relationship with their boss? So either someone who's really struggling and they want to turn things around, or someone who's got a decent relationship but just wants to enhance it. And I want us to be very practical as our
Yeah.
final parting shot, right? So I'll come to that. That's something I'm going to ask all 3 of you. But before I do that, Bongani, we talked a little bit about creating a safe space. And I mentioned that next month we're going to be talking about psychological safety as a topic for the whole session. But I do want to bring it in a little here because it's come up. How do we create that psychologically safe space? And I think there's a few things you've already said, Bongani, that speak to this, but I'd like us to bring it together. How do you as a leader create that psychologically safe space for employees to approach you with ideas or feedback?
Yeah, I think for me it goes back to that authority versus experience, because authority says I'm unapproachable. My word is the end. Experience says I'm here because of what I've experienced, but I'm willing to also learn and experience more. So I'll use an example. Michelle, if she was in my team, she's gone. She's spoken a lot about AI, using the internet, and I would want to learn more. Like just 2 days ago, I was asking the team how using AI in our creative process, right?
Mm,
So when you say experience, you're not preaching to the choir. What you're saying is, I'm part of the choir, and if I also need to learn, I'll learn. And it
yeah,
also opens you up to getting mentors, coaches as a leader, right? And
yeah,
being in environments where you can also learn and grow. Because when you ultimately, um, there's always room for learning, even for
yeah,
the leader. So you've not arrived, and the
yeah,
team gets that vibe. So
yeah.
for me, I think that's the beginning of psychological safety. And then I mentioned the one thing for me that's big is that let's fight about the work, right? Um, um, and not about each other, right? And everybody needs to. I think sometimes either by convenience or by default or by intention, people forget that we are at work to make money for the business.
Yeah.
That's what people forget. Like they really somehow along the way, people become, oh yeah, but they just about the money here. Of course we are. Yeah, the reason why you want to get a bonus at the end of the month, at the end of the year, is because we are about money. We are not
Yeah.
about feels. So people think because when you're about the money, you can't be about culture and psychological
Mm,
safety. It's not either or; it's all,
yeah.
right? So we are here.
Yeah.
We are here. The first thing is to create shareholder value, right?
Mm,
Because the shareholders put money into this business and they want to take it out. And I always use the example of things we love using, right? This platform, you said we're trying it for the first time, it's gonna work. There is people that put in time to
yeah.
create the perfect platform. When you think
Yeah.
about businesses, all we love flying Emirates, we love using Apple, we use Google, we
Mm,
love Nike. It's because people delivered to create a
yeah.
great product. So how do you separate yourself from that? You can't.
Yeah.
So even when
Yeah.
you are in a small business in the middle of Kampala, in a corner somewhere, it's an NGO, it's just the three of you, everybody needs to deliver because you're there to deliver value, either for the
Yeah.
community or for the NGO, which is a global NGO, or
Yeah.
wherever you find yourself in the
Yeah.
world. And I think
Yeah.
once everybody accepts that, and I always use the analogy of rowing in the same boat, rowing
Yeah.
in the same direction because we were in one boat. And my team loves it and hates it because I say, if you don't want to roll with us anymore, we'll pull to the side of the river, take you out, pick a new person, and we but there needs to be a rhythm. There needs to be cadence.
Yeah.
You can't have. I can't, as the MD, decide one day I'm not gonna roll. I'm just going to sit. Come on, guys, let's do it because then you get the boat going different sides and all that. So for me, it's about accepting that we're here to create value for communities, shareholders, employees included, and value is money. Um, and but also it doesn't take away the culture work that we need to do. And that authority experience thing, that's really quite big because
Yeah.
um, once you see authority, it's the police. It's like, it's like how when you're driving, when you see the police, even if I've been done wrong, you immediately start asking yourself, did I get where's my license? Do I have? Oh my God, they're gonna stop me. It's like
Yeah.
when you're landing from overseas and you see customs, you're like, oh my God, hey, did I buy something? You ask for the receipt. But and that's how we approach authority. So we
Yeah.
can't have that posture in the office. We need to have an
Yeah.
experience to say The reason why Bongani is there is because he deserves to be there. He's got the experience to lead us. And once you get there, you're also approaching it from a I want to learn, and as the leader, I want to teach.
Yeah, I really
Yeah.
love that. I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from this session, right? Is, the question I need to be asking myself, am I leaning into experience or authority, right? Because experience does create the space where someone is more likely to ask the questions. And I was laughing as you were saying it. It's true. I mean, when I'm driving, the beauty of living. Sorry to my Kenyan friends, but the beauty of living in South Africa is the roads, and I'm enjoying driving. Unlike when I was in Nairobi. Oh my goodness, driving in Nairobi is just so stressful. But I noticed that as soon as I see the cops, I'm looking at my speedometer to tell, oh, like automatically you're like on the defensive.
Mm,
So
mm,
you're right. And that is a very good analogy for the workplace. Are
mm.
people automatically on the defensive whenever you come into a space because
Yes.
of the posture that you've
Yes.
leaned into? You've leaned
Yeah.
into and the truth of the matter is, I think that the workplace of old, that authority got you results because that's the kind of people you were leading, people who were accustomed or used to authority. The,
Mm,
the truth of the matter is that the workplace of today, they don't respect authority,
mm.
right? You're more likely to have more issues when you are take that authoritative my way or the highway kind of approach,
Yeah.
as opposed to when you lean into experience. So I think
Mm.
that's really, really good point. So wow, we are coming to the end of this conversation. Two things I want to do before I come to your parting shots. So, I want to remind you guys we have a feedback form. Please use the QR code to tell us if you have any feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And then at the end of the session, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our workshop that's coming up. Actually, let me tell you now. So, we have a workshop coming up next month, 22nd and 23rd of August, and it is for HR practitioners. It's a mental health workshop for HR practitioners. And in a nutshell, we're looking at how, number one, you can prioritize you and your self care. HR often is the dumping ground for everyone else. And so you can find yourself really overwhelmed. And so we'll be looking at how you can really support yourself and build the boundaries and get the support you need, but then also how you can prioritize mental health in your organization and create the kind of culture that we are talking about here, a culture that respects people's well-being as we are driving for the business results. And I really like what you said, Mongani, that it's not an either or, it can be an and, right?
Mm.
We can be a space or an organization that values your well-being and still delivers the
Mm.
results. So if that's something that's of interest to you, visit our website, www.pts.co.ke/HR workshop, and you can find more details about that workshop. Guys, your parting shots. Bongani, let me stay with you and then we'll go around with the ladies. What is your parting shot? What practical tips? Maybe someone's joined us late. They've not
Mm.
had heard everything else we've talked about. What would you like them to go away with on this
Yeah.
topic of managing upwards and building positive relationships with our leaders?
Yeah. So I believe in a repetition because when you repeat yourself, it lands.
Yes.
So for me, is the foundation of managing upwards and leading because you can't. I don't like calling it managing downwards because it
Yes.
people. So the foundation of managing upwards and leading is leaning into experience more than leaning into authority. It doesn't necessarily mean that when you're leaning into experience, you're not able to make the hard decisions. Actually, leaning into experience gives you the authority to make the call. All right.
Mm,
So people will always respect. It's like that old saying where when you had problems in high school and your parents would say this too will pass, don't worry.
mm,
Or when you are a new parent and you're going, no man, he's crying, he's not stopping, and I'm like,
mm.
no, it will pass because of experience, right? So if
Yeah,
you lean into
yeah.
that, and Michelle comes into office as an example, and she's panicked about being late or having done badly in a client presentation, experience says we can always go back, apologize, and start again. And then you're opening up the door for learning. So for me, it's that's the foundation
Yeah.
that to lead to. I think, as you're saying, Africa moved away from having dictatorships across the continent many years ago. It was good then to lead with authority because that's how
Yeah.
Moi, Muzubanda, Kaunda,
Mm.
Mugabe did. But now that changed. So it starts from the top and it also leads into organizations.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you. And I think that for me is a really, really awesome takeaway. And I think it's a good question to ask yourself as a leader. Am I leaning into experience, or have I created an environment where, the reason why I'm not necessarily getting the feedback I desire is because people are just too afraid to talk about it. And like I said, we're talking about building psychological safety next month. So make sure that you are tuned in. Michelle, your parting shot, the voice of the early
Okay.
stage, professional. What are your reflections?
My parting shot to any early stage person, career, is I love to tell myself there's nothing I can't learn. So that means the feedback I'm getting, all this, everything you're listening to that you've heard today and these insights, there's nothing you can't learn in today's age and day. So take that as a challenge to keep on learning. And I think the first point is learn your supervisor, learn your peers, understand, just have that check in with your supervisor. Hi, we've been working on XYZ. How would you like me to give you updates? And make sure your updates are visible. So don't go in the corner and you're working and you're working and you're working, but no one knows what you're doing. So now make sure you're aligned, not just are you aligned, but you're actually giving those updates like, hi, this is done, it's complete, it's ready to send to client. Can you please review? So I think being proactive in that way as well, where you're seeking alignment from the onset. Do you like me to do weekly emails? Do you like me to shoot you a text? Would you like me to do this? Then once you've aligned on the ways of working, now start adopting them as you work. So yeah, I think there's nothing you can't learn. It's okay to make those mistakes if you found yourself you're at a tricky spot with your boss right now. Is just take a step back, take all the insights you've learned today and be like, okay, how do I approach this in a different way? And I think, as Susan said, demystify how you're seeing your managers and your boss. Yes, I know it could be like, yes, they have all this experience and knowledge. I feel so dumb in comparison, if you allow me to say, but demystify. Start talking to them as people and lean into the experience. I think something I've heard is like treat your managers as your thought partners. So you come to be like, how would you do this? I'm struggling here. How would you have done that? Really lean into that experience, and it will slowly start erasing that huge barriers. Feel like, oh, they're all the way up here, and I'm all the way down here. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Treat your manager as your thought partner. Powerful stuff. Susan, your parting shot.
Yeah. Managing upwards is often seen as a survival tool. People are like, how do I manage my boss? How do I make sure they're not on my tail? How do I? And I want us to see managing upwards a bit differently. And Michelle has really helped, and Bogani to really change that to I need to be proactive in building a relationship with my superiors who from whom I can learn and grow. So I'm taking charge of that relationship for my benefit. So I will learn, I will manage even from understanding who they are and who I am. I proactively start to create a cadence for my communication, for my check ins. I proactively do it myself rather than managing upwards being a survival tool or a reactive. I'm being proactive about it and
Yeah.
seeing this person as an opportunity for me to develop myself in my personal growth, in my professional growth, and in my career growth. Because this is a person who will weigh in on conversations where decisions will be made about what is your next step and what is your next move. And this is somebody
Yeah.
who has so much to offer you. So shifting
Yeah.
your mind on managing upwards from it being reactive, survival, managing a bad situation, to me taking charge of this relationship and getting
Yeah.
the most I can out of it.
I love that. Being proactive. I think that has been awesome. Guys, thank you so much for your insights. You have been so amazing. I have learned a lot myself, and I know my audience has learned a lot as well. There's a comment that we got from Charles Masinde, very profound and insightful discussion. And I know that those who will interact with this later on our socials will also appreciate you. So allow me to appreciate you for your time. Thank you so much for giving off your lunch hour. Guys, like I say, every month, if you provide the lunch, we will provide the learning. So do diarize next month, the last Wednesday of the month, and we're going to be talking about cultivating psychological safety. So that's a topic that's of interest to you. Please do join us. Allow me to release my panel. Bongani, thank you so much for
Thank you.
being here. Susan, thank you as always for being here. And Michelle, you are a star. Thank you very much for being here. And I really do love that background. It's so, so phenomenal. Really grateful to have you all. So let me say goodbye. Um,
Cheers.
Thank you
Cheers.
very much. Guys, there you have it. We had such a great conversation, and I know that you have enjoyed it. Well, you should have enjoyed it as much as I have. I have my three parting shots. What is it that I have learned? Number one, managing upwards is proactively gaining alignment with your manager. It is you being proactive. Number two, managing upwards is you taking ownership of your own professional development. Because when you manage upwards effectively, it's beneficial to you. It helps you to grow your career and it build an advocate and sponsor in your manager. And then lastly, as a leader, lean into experience rather than authority because that will create a safe environment that will allow you to then have those kind of conversations with your team. And it makes it easier for them to manage up. And lastly, let me give you a bonus one. I know I had said three, is as an early stage professional, career professional, remember that feedback is not personal. It's designed to help you grow. And you can see this when you look at version one in comparison to version three of whatever you're working on. You can see that you've grown as a result of the feedback. So that's it from me today. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a really great conversation. It's been good seeing your comments online. Don't forget to visit our website, www.pts.co.ke/HR workshop. If you are an HR leader who's interested in understanding how to cultivate the right kind of culture for yourself, your team, and for your organization when it comes to mental and emotional well being. See you next month. Thank you very much for joining us.